Welcome to another installment of Fighting for the Faith here on YouTube. If you remember hearing something years ago about Ed Young of Fellowship Church, the guy who burnt all of his Botox on top of the roof of his church when he did his sex challenge thing. Yeah, if you heard that he had a private jet, if you seem to remember something about that, go ahead and click on the subscribe button down below and ring the bell, because we're going to remind everybody about that particular fact, because Ed Young recently, super duper recently, preached a sermon called Barnyard Friends, and it's about greed. I know stop looking at me like that. I don't make these things up. I have no idea why he named it Barnyard Friends, because it's Ed Young. That's all I can say. And he's preaching about greed, and as far as I'm concerned, he don't have much by way of credibility when it comes to preaching about greed. So let's whirl this thing up, and we'll get right to it. Here's Ed Young and Barnyard Friends. Here we go.
12 years old when my youngest brother was born. He was a surprise. I remember reading him children's books, and my favorite book I ever read to my brother was a book called Barnyard Friends. I really loved that book. And I have to confess to you, it was one of the first times I began to work on my sound effects. I always have loved sound effects, but I used to read him that book, and he would love it. And
maybe that's the reason why he named the Sermon on Greed Barnyard Friends. He likes, doing sound effects. Really annoying sound effects, yeah.
I've kind of memorized part of Barnyard Friends. So here you go. So I would read it in this voice for some reason. I would go, Barnyard Friends. I don't know why I use that voice, but I'm like 12 years old. And I really read.
Which biblical text are you preaching on again? I'm a little confused here.
Barnyard Friends to Cliff from the time I was 12 to maybe 14. So Barnyard Friends. So the first picture would show a realistic picture of a pig and the baby pig eating pig slop. And here's what it said. Dinner time on the farm. And then I would go. He would laugh and laugh and laugh. And then the next page. It's kind of sick, I remember this, isn't it?
You just walk down memory lane here, dude. That's clearly what you think sermons are for.
Showed a horse and a little, colt by the horse. And the horse, I would use this, as my... Isn't my baby cute? So I would just go through. I don't want to do all the animals, like all sorts of things. But, well, I'm not sure an elephant was part of the... I just threw that in.
You know what's really weird? I do think we covered a sermon of his in 2018 where he did that elephant noise too. Barnyard Friends. Yeah, okay.
But I think you feel me. Barnyard Friends. It's a great book. I tried to find it on the World Wide Web, out of print. Barnyard Friends. I mean, the real Barnyard Friends. Jesus today is going to tell us about Barnyard Friends.
What? I don't recall the Barnyard Friends parable of Jesus. Which translation are you working from there, Ed?
Jesus, in essence, opens up this book and he goes, okay, Barnyard Friends. Why would Jesus talk about Barnyard Friends?
You still haven't shown me that he has. I'm a little skeptical at the moment, just saying.
Do you have Barnyard Friends? I don't know. I think at the end of this talk, you'll go, okay, I either do or I don't. Barnyard Friends. Why would Jesus talk about Barnyard Friends? Well, a couple of guys were arguing in the crowd. Thousands were in attendance to hear Jesus talking. Some of the guys were arguing about money, about inheritance issues. Brothers were going back and forth. I need this, or I want that, or Dad wanted me to have that.
Why don't you just read the text? The word of God is living and active, sharper than a double-edged sword. Your summary, paraphrase, retelling, how you imagine the text goes, yeah, it doesn't have that same power, you know. We're as pastors, we're supposed to, you know, preach the word.
Arguing about just what the guy had left. And so they lob a question to Jesus. Hey, Jesus, hey, settle this issue, which was common back in the day, you know, when rabbis would speak, people would just throw questions at them, sort of like a first century press conference, so to speak. So Jesus answers this question in a highly unusual way. Well, first of all, in verse 15 of Luke chapter 12, he brings up...
All right, so now we know where we're supposed to be. All right. Luke chapter 12. All right, let me pull this up. Luke 12, verse 15. Okay, let me fast forward here. All right, so here's the account. We'll take a look at it and see if we can identify any barnyard friends, you know, like elephants and horses and pigs and lions and tigers and bears. Oh my. So Luke 12:13. Someone in the crowd said to Jesus, "Teacher, tell my brother to divide the inheritance with me." But Jesus said to him, "Man, who made me a judge or arbiter over you?" And he said to them, "Take care and be on your guard against all covetousness, for one's life does not consist in the abundance of his possessions." So he told them a parable, saying, "The land of a rich man produced plentifully. And he thought to himself, 'What shall I do? For I have nowhere to store my crops.' And he said, 'I will do this. I will tear down my barns and build larger ones, and there I will store all my grain and my goods. And I will say to my soul, Soul, you have ample goods laid up for many years. Relax, eat, drink, be merry.' But God said to him, 'Fool, that this night your soul is required of you, and the things you have prepared, whose will they be? So is the one who lays up treasure for himself and is not rich toward God.'" Yeah, this is clearly a text dealing with, you know, where your heart is, and, you know, talking about money being something like an idol in your life. You know, your deity, the God that you look to, and in your greed, you forget the fact that, yeah, you actually are your brother's keeper. I think it was Ambrose of Milan, the church father, who noted that this guy was very foolish, because rather than storing this food in barns laid up for himself, he should have stored this grain in the bellies of the poor. Yeah, that's kind of, I think that's a good way of looking at this text. So is the reason why this sermon that Ed Young is preaching because the word barns appears once in the text? I'm detecting a little creative license on his part, shall we say. We continue.
Greed. He just talks about greed. So they throw this question at him, and then Jesus goes in verse 15. He said to them, the two guys, the two bros, "Take heed and beware of greed, for one's life does not consist of the stuff, of the possessions that he owns."
Indeed.
He talks about greed.
Yeah.
Isn't it interesting, just to talk about greed for a second? Greed was once called a vice, now it's a virtue. Now it's like, "Oh boy, you're greedy." Well, anyway, Jesus throws that out, and then he tells...
Is it really become that bad in society that people think that greed is a virtue? I don't know anybody who thinks that. Yeah, just hanging out with the wrong set. I don't know here.
These two guys a story. And this story is fascinating because if you put yourself in the sandals of his crowd, you kind of go, wow, this sounds like a very positive, kind of a business vibe type story from Jesus. I mean, it sounds.
What are you talking about? What are you talking? How could this sound like some kind of business vibe story that somehow somebody can accidentally, just as they begin reading it, think that greed's a good thing? You seem to forget we have the law of God written on our hearts. But Jesus doesn't begin the story with telling the story. The land of a rich man produced plentifully. Jesus begins with the words, "Take care, be on your guard against all covetousness, for one's life does not consist in the abundance of his possessions." You know, that little disclaimer right there at the beginning of that parable makes it impossible for somebody to sit there and go, wow, man, Jesus is giving us a business vibe. Woo! And boy, he's really telling us how great it is to amass possessions. Only if you failed fourth grade reading comprehension. But okay, we continue.
Really cool about making a lot of money, and after all, we want to make a lot of money, and the money is for me, and I can invest the money and have my money working for me, have this giant portfolio. So that's what everyone's thinking. So as I read this for the first.
What am I watching here? I mean, okay, this is just annoying.
Time, I was thinking the same thing. I was thinking, wow, okay, greed. Maybe greed is good. And you're talking about greed here, Jesus. And maybe greed, maybe this desire to acquire is a God thing. Well, let's see what Jesus says. Look.
Again, only if you failed fourth grade reading comprehension could you even remotely begin to think that the desire to acquire is a good thing while reading this parable. I mean, his explanation, it's not real. Nobody thinks this way.
Verse 16, Luke chapter 12. And he told them this parable. Again, them being the two guys, right? The ground of a certain rich man yielded an abundant harvest. I'm like, well, that's good. Good for him. This guy's banking, man. I mean, he's rolling.
When you read the Bible, do you just work your way through one verse and sit there and emote based upon the one verse? He's telling a story, man. I mean, ever since I was a wee little lad, when I would hear a story told to me, it's like I would kind of take in the story, before I would start to reflect on how different parts of the story were making me feel in the moment. It's just one sentence. And as soon as Jesus takes a breath, the next sentence is coming. This is not exegesis. I don't even know what this is.
He's a heavy hitter. He thought to himself, the guy that made all this money, what shall I do? I mean, that's an honest question. When I make money, when you make money, I mean, that's what I think. What shall I do? Sometimes, if I make extra money, maybe an investment, maybe for me, a book deal, maybe a consulting fee or whatever I'm doing, I go.
We just learned a little bit about Ed Young's cash flow there. Book deal, consulting fee. Okay.
What shall I do?
I don't know. Maybe you buy more fuel for your private jet? I'm just taking a stab in the dark here,
You're the same way. It's so funny. I can talk about 3 subjects like death, I can talk about money, and I can talk about sex. And 2 out of 3 of those are negative. But every time I talk about death and money, people get kind of funny, and that's okay. Just everybody take a deep breath. Yeah, we're just going to talk about stuff. I mean, I have to talk about it.
It's got to talk about stuff, man. Got to talk about money from time to time. Because Jesus did. Yeah. Okay.
About it. Most of his parables were about stuff. Stuff in the Bible is talked about more than.
What on earth? Most of Jesus's parables were about stuff. Yeah. That's so profound, man. So deep it's unfathomable. I'm backing this up just a little bit.
Yeah, we're just going to talk about stuff. I mean, I have to talk about it.
Mm-hmm.
Jesus talked about it. Most of his parables were about stuff. Stuff in the Bible is talked about more than prayer, more than heaven or hell. Stuff. So don't judge me.
We continue.
We love to say that, don't we? It's so funny. That's a whole nother subject, but I'm just telling you what Jesus said about stuff. So sounds to me like this story's going pretty good, doesn't it? Make a lot of money. This guy made a lot of money. Maybe sometimes you have extra money, and it's like, whoa, cool. Well, it even gets better. This guy now says, I have these barnyard friends. I have these barns, and I'm sure he had a lot of friends in the barns.
And there we now know why he named the sermon Barnyard Friends. Yep.
And he said, what shall I do? Verse 17, I have no place to store all of my excess, all of this stuff. So he makes an arrogant decision. An arrogant decision. Say that with me, an arrogant decision. Have you ever made an arrogant decision? Well, I have. Yeah, I have made an arrogant decision before because I've had things happen to me before and I've said to myself, that's for me. I didn't even really think about God. I thought, I did that. I made that. It's my stuff. Greed. Greed. I wrote a book about greed, the first of my 14 books.
He wrote a book about greed. Okay. You ever heard of the concept of pastor? You need to practice what you preach. Just saying.
I'll quote you a definition from greed, chapter 5, page 89. It's out of print now, but I want to write it again.
Just like Barnyard Friends. Please don't write it again.
Greed is the desire to acquire, as I said earlier, but let me add something to it, that's gone haywire.
The desire to acquire that's gone haywire. That's his definition. Okay. We'll let him repeat it just a second here.
Acquire that's gone haywire. It's okay to have a desire to acquire. What's wrong with that? The Bible is not anti-ownership. The Bible does not say that money is bad. Doesn't say that stuff is satanic. It's not in the Bible. Okay? Isn't that good? Just nod your head like, yeah, that's good. That's good. That's good. So money's neutral. Now, the love of money is what will mess you up and me up.
Yeah, I agree. Now, let's go back in time here to the year 2010. In February of 2010, Brett Shipp, investigative reporter down in Dallas, did an expose and showed that Ed Young in Fellowship Church owned a private jet. In fact, at the time that the story broke, there was an ex-employee of Fellowship Church who went on camera and remained anonymous, who ratted him out and talked about his trip on the private jet. And then in April of 2010, there was a follow-up. Yeah, a full-blown follow-up to that story. So greed is the desire to acquire that's gone haywire, according to Ed Young in this Barnyard Friends sermon. Let's just take a look at some of the investigative reporting regarding Fellowship Church's private jet that Ed Young used to travel to resorts. Because he's got a minister there and stuff, I think. Yeah.
He's been flying around to exotic locations on the Fellowship Church jet, but has megachurch pastor Ed Young also been vacationing on the congregation's dime? Well, Young says no.
Channel 8's reporter Brett Chip joins us now as News 8 investigates. Brett?
John and Gloria, Fellowship Church pastor Ed Young is widely known for his contemporary style and controversial messages. But there's something in particular he's not so open about. His church's $8 million jet, first leased back in March of 2007, but it wasn't until a News 8 investigation this past February that Pastor Ed Young revealed its existence to his own congregation. And it wasn't until just a few days ago that we found out through a government records request exactly where that jet was traveling. Now, according to a public relations firm in New York, the Fellowship Church jet is used primarily for vital ministry affairs, helping Young minister to more than 250,000 people. But wait until...
Oh, yeah. 250,000 people. You can't reach them unless you have a private jet.
You see where the jet has been going to conduct those vital missionary services. And once you see where the jet has been going, you may also want to know how much it's costing and who's paying for it. Questions we'll try to answer tonight at 10 o'clock. Join us as News 8 investigates.
Well, he told his congregation he had nothing to hide. He insisted.
Yeah, this is the 10 o'clock version, the later version of the story, yeah.
The News 8 investigation about his lifestyle was wrong, but Ed Young, the pastor at Fellowship Church in Grapevine, may soon have to answer numerous trips by the leased church jet to resort locations, travel costing tens of thousands of dollars per trip. News 8's Brett Chip joins us now. He's got some new information about the use of that jet. Brett?
That's right, John. 3 months ago, we first reported on the lifestyle of Fellowship Church pastor Ed Young. We revealed the existence of a private church jet and a complex network of private businesses. For months, we have requested interviews with Pastor Young. Each time, we have been referred to a New York public relations firm. Yet they have declined to answer simple questions, such as, who uses the church jet and for what? So we did a little digging of our own, and tonight, News 8 investigates. Fellowship Church, located in Grapevine, has thousands of members on 5 campuses. Pastor Ed Young says his church and travels have allowed him to minister to more than 250,000 people. But Young may be best known for this.
Sex is like pizza.
His 2008 sermon urging married couples to have 7 days of sex. So sensational, he made guest appearances on several network programs, including Comedy Central.
The church, we've been quiet about sex, and something that God has not been quiet about. So I think Christians...
You're not doing it right then.
Yeah, it's true.
Young is somewhat less eager to talk about this, a News 8 investigation into his Fellowship Church's leasing of an $8 million Dassault Falcon 50 private jet, which the church keeps at a hangar at Alliance Airport. While Young is not legally or professionally obligated to disclose anything to his congregants, he did respond to our report about his travel.
And this year I'm flying commercially like a mad dog to places all over the world.
Yeah. Sounds like he got caught. And so he's, this is his version of like, honey, I'll sleep on the couch tonight,
Also have chartered planes.
Then last on his list of preferred air travel, something he had not disclosed to his congregation until after our story.
We also lease private aircraft.
According to the New York public relations firm hired by Young, the plane used by Pastor Young is used primarily for vital ministry affairs. This
primarily vital ministry, vital.
Plane has allowed Pastor Young access to minister to more than 250,000 people who...
Because you can get to them so much quicker, If you could fly there in a private jet, it's a lot quicker because, then you don't have to, wait in line and queue up and then go to the baggage claim and stuff. So, I mean, if you fly commercially, in coach or something, you can't reach 250,000 people. It's just not humanly possible.
He otherwise would not have been able to reach. But FAA flight logs obtained by News 8 tell a more detailed story. Using dates, times, and destinations dating back to March 2007 when the jet was acquired, we plotted the trips on a monthly calendar. Shaded in green are the days of the month the church jet was being used, presumably by Young. 416
The Bahamas.
15 days in less than 3 years. Many of those days, 150 of them, the jet was parked at an airport in Miami where Young has a branch of his fellowship church. But as we found out a few Sundays ago, Young and his associates regularly minister to the Miami congregation via satellite signal.
That's right. The Miami campus of Fellowship Church is a video venue church. Only on rare occasions does Ed Young actually physically preach there. Yeah.
To their church from the Fellowship Church in Grapevine. The question is, of those 150 days the jet was in Miami, how often was Young on the jet and how often was he actually serving his congregation? According to the New York public relations firm, Pastor Young is personally very active at his Miami campus. He often returns week after week to lead sermons. All of those trips to Miami, all of those days in southern Florida, and while his church is only open 1 day a week, there is one place belonging to Young that is open 24/7. Specifically, a condominium which Young
High-rise condo, beachfront, Miami.
makes passing reference to in this address to his congregation.
I have a condo. I have a condo. It's not paid for either, but I have invested in a condo. I have that.
And this is it, Young's condo, a gated 2,600 square foot oceanfront condominium in Coconut Grove, Florida, which he bought in 2007 for $1.1 million. From 16th floor oceanfront balcony, a spectacular view of the Dinner Key Marina, the largest marina in Florida. Also of interest to Young in South Florida, one of his admitted passions.
Florida Keys, an epic day after the tarpon.
That's what it's all about. Woo! Yes, sir, baby. Congratulations. What's this one?
In addition,
Yeah, I think you get the point. We'll put a link up to this video so that if you'd like to see the remainder of it, you can. If you want to just find it on YouTube for yourself, it's Ed Young, second WFAA expose, April 2010. So remember in the Barnyard Friends sermon, he defines greed as the desire to acquire that's gone haywire. Need I say more? That's my point. So if you found this helpful, please share this video, and all the information on how you can support Fighting for the Faith and Pirate Christian Media is in the description down below. And if you don't already subscribe to our podcast, there is so much more discernment that you are missing. That's right. We do, 2 hours of discernment work every day, 5 days a week. And you can find my podcast over at fightingforthefaith.com. If you're sitting there going, I really would like more of this kind of stuff, that's the place to get it. And you subscribe to our podcast and listen to the episodes that way. And all of our archives are up there, and they're available for free. So you can go back through the 10 years of Fighting for the Faith and, and overdose on it if you like. But so until next time, may God richly bless you in the grace and mercy won by Jesus Christ and his vicarious death on the cross for all of your sins. Amen.